After that little speech, the man stood back up tall, adjusting his suit somewhat, as he was wearing a very pristine-looking white suit that matched the white of his hair. Respectable-looking glasses. Obviously the type of guy who has money and wants everybody to know it. The type of guy that wants to look respectable but comes off as egotistical. He stepped away from me, walking towards his companion, an average-sized man, once again wearing a set of glasses, but these were more basic in nature. A cigarette in his mouth, looking like he had been working for a very long time and needed to take a nap. Dark circles under his eyes. Sitting in front of a couple of briefcases that had been opened up and appeared as if they had a variety of different instruments and objects in them, as well as a laptop computer, which he was furiously typing away on. The man seemed to completely ignore his co-worker, I guess you could call him, simply reaching into one of the briefcases and pulling out a small vial and walking back over to me. Well, first things first, we're going to need a sample from you, he said, handing me the bottle. Simply uncork it and let your saliva drip into it, or spit it in, or however you feel like doing it. We'll need the vial filled to that line there, he said, pointing to a small black line that had been marked on the test tube. My spit? Really? You actually need it? Yes, boy. Your saliva is what carries the genetic mark of your particular house, your bloodline. It's part of what facilitates the process of transforming one into a werewolf. We do it with a bite, you know. The process is facilitated by your saliva, which has an enhanced ability to absorb your spiritual energy. So as you bite your intended target in order to transform them, you imbue the saliva with large amounts of your spiritual energy. This is what causes the transformation, and what facilitates the level of power that you wish to pass. So, in your saliva there are markers, genetic markers as well as magical ones, which this test is designed to study. It will allow us to determine from which house you spring. I don't have all day to continue explaining this. Just fill the vial, boy, he said, looking at me impatiently. Ugh, I replied. Fine, as I uncorked the bottle and did my best to let some saliva go inside of it. It took me a little bit to fill it to the line. I never thought I would have to try to produce saliva. It was actually more difficult than it sounded. But eventually I filled it, placing the cork back on it and handing it outwards, which the man snatched out of my hand very abruptly. Ugh, finally. Thought you were going to take all day, he said, turning around and handing the vial to the man who was typing on the computer, who didn't even bother looking, simply grasped the vial with one hand, placing it into a small device located within one of the briefcases, before turning away from his computer for the first time and starting to move about, as if he was working on something with the saliva, moving around other vials that looked like they were contained with different color fluids. There were an assortment of different vials and needles and all sorts of other things that he began moving around, shifting and interchanging, mixing here or there. I really couldn't make heads or tails of what exactly he was doing. And before I could continue watching, the man in the white suit reached into another of the cases and grabbed a large object. Something like a wooden rod or stick that seemed to have some engravings on the ends of it, and metal rings, also engraved with strange writing. Okay, this test will take a minute, so we might as well move on to the next step, which is testing your tear. Now, once again, this is a newer method that has been tested and shown to be far more accurate than the previous measurement standards, and doesn't actually require any experience or work from you, which the previous measures couldn't be completed until you were a little more competent. Quite simply, all you have to do is bite down on this. A wolf's teeth can transmit a great deal of magical energy, spiritual energy, and a myriad of other things. So, by biting into this, it will get a direct connection to your spiritual output, and measure it accordingly, at which point your tear will be engraved on the side, burnt in through magical effect. It's quite a handy little implement, and has shortened my work a great deal. This process used to take days, especially in the case of eggs or newly changed wolves who didn't know their respective sires or parentage, he said as he handed the stick over to me. Don't waste my time with a bunch of questions again. Just do it, boy. This guy was so annoying. He was impatient about everything. I couldn't help but give him a sour expression as I took the stick, and begrudgingly bit down into it. Remember, keep a tight clench on it. A loose grip could unsteady the results. And those sticks aren't free. They're a very expensive magical implement that can only be used once. If we have to retake this test, you'll find that we are capable of billing you. It was at that point that I tried to bite down as hard as I could. I definitely couldn't afford a bill. How much does magical stuff even cost? I thought to myself, clenching down on that stick as hard as I could. For a few moments, nothing seemed to happen, until out of nowhere, there was a burst of light from both ends of the stick, as they seemed to catch fire. It scared the hell out of me. Without even thinking about it, I spit it out. "What the hell?" I shouted, seeing the stick still scorching somewhat as it hit the ground, before finally going out. "Well, it appears we have our result," the man said, bending down and gently picking up the stick, trying not to touch the section where I had bitten it, turning the stick to the side and looking at the end. "Wow, that is something, now isn't it?" he said, looking at it. "Exceptionally unusual." "What's unusual?" I said. "Well, this," he said, pointing the very end of the stick in my direction. As he did, I could see a scorch mark on the end of the stick. There, as clear as day, I could see a number that looked like it had been burnt in with like a wood burner or something like that. Scorch marks surrounding it. It was the number 1. It appears we have a Tier 1 wolf, the highest grade one can achieve, and from one who claims to be just an egg. I'll have you know that if you are a Tier 1 wolf, and an egg, as you so claim to be, then you would also be the first one in recorded history. No egg has ever been a Tier 1. That is highly unusual, which only makes your claim seem all the more absurd.